Welcome to another episode of Remap Radio. I am your host, Rob Zachney, and this is episode 112 for October 3rd, 2025. Today we are joined by Chia Contreras.
Hello.
Patrick Klepek.
Hello.
Janet Garcia.
Hello.
As always, we are a listener and reader-supported show and website. If you enjoy Remap Radio and wish to become a supporter, you can learn more at remapradio.com/sign up, or just click the orange button in the upper right corner of the website. Our subscribers let us keep doing the shows, the streams, and the articles that define Remap, but we're sick of it. We don't want to have to sing for our supper anymore. Oh, Saudi royal family, please buy remapradio.com for the princely sum of just a few humble $1 billion so that we can maybe we'll do a panel at the Riyadh Comedy Festival. We're flexible. We'll travel, provided the accommodations meet our standards, and we never actually have to say anything positive about the Saudi royal family or pretend we don't remember a certain regrettable incident involving a reporter and kill teams and bone saws. Beyond that, though, we're happy to do business. Hit us up. Give us a little phone call.
There's a condo in the market in Boston.
Oh, my God.
Just buy the condo. Please just buy the condo.
The condo.
Would the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund perchance enjoy a little Northern Massachusetts real estate?
Oh, my God.
Oh, you got oil and a diverse portfolio of culturally significant assets around the world. Sounds to me like there's a country that's a little poor in wood slats. Maybe you could use a few. So yeah, that is the big news of today. Patrick, you want to outline what has happened with EA, or what is planned to happen with EA?
Planned to happen. I suppose could fall through, but I think given the state of things, I'd err on the side of happening. EA announces agreement to be acquired by PIF, Silver Lake, and an Affinity Partners for $55 billion. Electronic Arts Inc., a global leader in interactive entertainment, today announces entered into a definitive agreement to be acquired by an investor consortium, the consortium, comprised of PIF, Silver Lake.
Hang on, when you said the consortium, suddenly didn't sound good. Like, is it? I know that they just define their terms and legalese, but like the second you're like the consortium, I'm like, hey, wait a second, this suddenly started to sound bad.
It's in quotes too. Like the quotes also add sort of an anchor like quality to it.
Executing
the consortium,
executing our plan of financial investments. The plan.
Ethan Hunt in the new Mission Impossible must track down the consortium and take out PIF, Silver Lake, and Affinity Partners because of their all-crash transaction that values EA at an enterprise value of approximately $55 billion.
This is the consortium, 47.
I'm not sure even Agent 47 would have the muscle to take this on.
When done, 47.
Yeah, EA has gone, or it plans to go private, no longer be sort of a public-facing stockholder company. There has been an enormous $55 billion investment by this group of partners, which most notably includes the Public Investment Fund, the sort of wealth fund extension of Saudi Arabia that is, what do they call it? Their 2030, Saudi Vision 2030, which is essentially spending an unlimited literal spigot of oil money in order to essentially buy out cultural, economic objects throughout the globe. Rob and I have talked about it in relation to was it Live Golf, right? Isn't that their extension there? And the what's being attempted here is to purchase Electronic Arts. You might ask yourself, is Electronic Arts worth $55 billion? The answer is no. The answer is no. They're being bought at an extraordinarily high evaluation of their stock price. Will be burdened with an enormous amount of debt, and will continue to be led by, well, at least for the time being, Andrew Wilson, who's been the CEO of EA for a minute now. And if this goes through the sort of regulatory hand waves, which are at least likely to be the case on the American side, and the shareholders say, yes, please, which they're likely to because shareholders are going to receive a very pretty higher than the current stock price buyout.
We
if
love
they
to see
approve
it.
this.
Shout out to shareholders. Congratulations. Things have been too hard for you guys for too long. I'm glad you guys finally caught a break.
It's a, as even the press release points out, a 25% premium on EA's current stock price. So it is a similar thing happened like when Musk bought Twitter. It's just like this is basically like an offer that shareholders will not be able to refuse, sort of situation. And what that means for the future of EA, I have read every. I'm not a business reporter. I've tried to read like every market analysis to be like, what is okay? Like, give me the optimistic case on this. What clearly seems to be a very ominous move for the culture, for video games, for the world. And like, there's basically like no argument that can be made that will result. All the outcomes for EA for video games are likely regressive and upsetting. Whether it's something as simple as there will be extreme layoffs, whether it's reading in the Financial Times that their plan to make the math work on this is to deeply invest in artificial intelligence as a primary development tool, whether it is the injection of Saudi's regressive like cultural politics into like EA's products, whether it's no
more women drivers in the F1 series. Sorry, Saudi Arabia. Actually, Saudi Arabia pretends they favor that, but not really. It's
Wait,
fake.
what? Can you explain?
There's various. So Saudi Arabia has an interesting politics around women driving cars, which is I believe it is actually illegal. But then they promote Saudi women race drivers on the international stage, which is kind of a weird thing.
The driving ban was lifted, it looks like, in 2018, but has been a historical part of Saudi.
Shout out to Saudi Arabia.
We simply do not have to.
Rob's giving a lot of shout outs in this podcast.
Holy.
Yeah, it is unique on its face for a public company to go private. That this is big. If you wanted like the sole sort of optimist case for this move that I've been able to see is that, well, in theory, like being tied to the whims of the market and shareholders demanding endless number goes up. If you could afford to just go private and make things that sold money and that it was to a degree that you were happy with, and you don't have to tell anyone whether that is true or not, it only matters to the people who are privately running the company. Sure, that sounds great. It's just there's nothing to currently suggest that's likely to be what happens, given the sheer size and scale of EA and its sort of broader influence, especially in sports culture, right? Like, it really does feel like, to me, this is a direct extension of the Saudi Arabian government wanting to inject itself into sports. It's an extension of golf. It's a way of essentially purchasing, FC 25, Madden, hockey, like all of a sudden they have a direct ownership and pipeline into sports, which has been one of their large, one of the big decisions they've made is to really put themselves in a position to try and purchase and muscle their way into sports culture in the last 10 years.
Yeah, this is probably not good news. The thing is, some of this is like, there might be layoffs. Yes, but there might be layoffs. There might be layoffs for all sorts of reasons, right? Like,
we all believed in Andrew Wilson's,
right.
It didn't seem exactly like a company that was heading in a direction that aligned with sorts of games that we like to play. It was just a doubling down and prioritization on how much can we make from Ultimate Team across several different sports. Fuck the rest.
Right, and like you could imagine over time, like not having to answer the pressures of being a publicly traded company could provide some upshot to how EA operates and the sort of risks it's like permitting itself to take. But it also just seems unlikely that it would actually go in that direction, because this is not, the vibe around this is not the games people at EA want to be back in charge, and this deal has been structured so that we can have, we've done a deal with the devil to get creative freedom and license. That doesn't seem likely. Plus the fact that in all the ways that count, this seems like a very typical sort of buyout situation where you have a company now sitting with what's the figure, $20 billion on its books?
Yes.
$20 billion of new debt from the acquisition.
Yeah.
That is going to have to service. So that is going to be expensive just to service, much less pay down. And so that is going to put a real pressure on, shareholders are bad. Facing the quarterly pressures is bad. Dealing with this kind of pressure is also going to be bad. This is the sort of thing that will not allow for a lot of disruptions to cash flow or unexpected outlays. So that would certainly seem to point toward this being a company that's going to focus on having as predictable a revenue situation as possible, which, yes, probably points to all sports games all the time doubling down on the sort of gotchification of EA sports stuff. And that does dovetail with what we know of the investors, which is, the sovereign wealth fund, the being used as a way to acquire soft power and sort of occupy civic spaces around the world. Whether that's whether this accelerates a trend that EA was already on, or destroys EA, that remains to be seen. It's, for me, it's hard to be optimistic about this, but at the same time, the trends already felt so bad that I also can't fully feel apocalyptic about it, because I kind of feel like a lot of the situations I would worry about here, I already kind of suspected EA was going to end up in these places anyway.
They're going to shut down BioWare? I can't believe Saudi Arabia did that. It's sort of a little bit of what you're getting at here is it seems like, a studio like BioWare owned by EA is on borrowed time, right? Like, the best chance they have is to get a Mass Effect game out, if that. Dragon Age didn't seem to grant them much longer of a leash, and was that going to meaningfully change, in this scenario, where if they came in and said, we don't, put aside whether it's trying to inject sort of aggressive politics, we don't want your, queer-coded, relationships in our video games, they might just look at BioWare and go, I don't really understand the ROI on this one, doesn't really line up with the rest of the business. That would be sad, given more the long arc of BioWare, but not necessarily unexpected, given the trajectory of BioWare as a studio, especially in its relationship to what EA has prioritized and found profitable over the last 10 years, which increasingly has not been anything like a traditional single-player RPG action game. Those are sort of anomalies that sort of allow them to pretend that they're anything more than just an annualized sports publisher doubling down on exploitative card games.
Would y'all say EA Originals also falls into that camp? Because that's a element I'm concerned about. I really like the EA Originals division.
Right, that has been something that has happened through again. But I also consider that to be I consider that a fluke. They've done versions of this over the year. I mean, Rock Band, technically comes out of a collaboration with MTV and EA. EA has done some cool stuff, right? Even, Dead Space, one of my favorite games of the last couple of years. Loved that remake, but it's just very easy to imagine all of that stuff being a difficult. It's a challenging market in the best of circumstances, and so if you come in and you're trying to maximize the profitability, if that is indeed the goal, very easy to imagine that being something you just spin off and sell ASAP.
Yeah, because that's it it is definitely a lesser known, like, it's like, oh, EA happens to do this too. But it is like I don't know if they officially think of it as a subdivision of their publishing arm, or just like a term that is used kind of internally, or like what the categorization is. But it's been around for like almost 10 years, which is like kind of crazy. And has definitely produced like a good amount of solid titles, but also some not so great title. Like for every EA original hit, there's also one that like didn't quite pan out.
You get Shadows of the Damned, which is a great game.
Unravel. Unravel 2.
Unravel. What's Brutal Legend comes out of the EA Originals like program again, like Rock.
All the Hazelight stuff is EA Originals as well.
The funny part about the EA Originals was that it sort of masks the lack of ability for EA to produce like lots of meaningful internal like creative video games by doing all these partnerships with other studios that are doing the sort of things that kind of mask a otherwise really risk averse portfolio coming from their own studios. But yeah, it's I think I mean look, the ick here for a lot of people, I think understandably, is the idea of let's just say government. Like I don't like just saying foreign government, like a government entity coming in and purchasing, you know, a video game company sort of outright in this way, especially the fact that, you know, the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, involved in this. All of that feels like it's weird that it's I think it's sort of complicated, as you point out, Rob, that it's a company like EA that I don't think many people have much affinity towards, right? Like I'm not even sure people who play.
Oh, you mean the worst company in the world, 2021 or whatever it was?
When they were doing that stuff, there were times where they got voted that, but they were also like producing like pretty good video games at the same time, and yet we're still finding themselves at the top of that. That was a Forbes list, right?
Oh, I can't remember.
I think it was a Forbes like worst because famously I believe they would end up on that list like higher than like oil companies.
Yeah.
And like higher than beat out Exxon in the bracket, like EA once again.
Because if there's one thing gamers can do, it's like Brigade.
Yes.
Brigade a vote.
Yes.
Yeah. It's that is the other part of it. The Kushner connection, the fact that you have what certainly seems like a lot of outright attempts by people connected to the Trump administration, the Trump administration itself, attempting to also seize control of the public space or to wring concessions out of private companies, either directly or just by getting those companies to play ball. So, this is against a backdrop of what was it, like comments last week about, if they could make it happen, they would want new TikTok to be 100% MAGA content.
Yes. Right.
And so,
which is the trend of these like authoritarian leaning, governments that inject themselves into the private sector and like whether directly or indirectly. And that is a trend we're seeing accelerated here in the United States currently. And so having something like this happen in parallel with it certainly feels of a piece of a really upsetting trend.
I mean, this is like they did a deal with Pfizer and there's a Trump RX website.
Yeah. That's the good shit.
Hell yeah. This is good. Finally, you can get ivermectin delivered directly to your house.
Like this acceleration is like, the EA thing is sort of a culmination of a long like a trend that has occurred with the Saudi government for a hot minute now, right? So it's like they have the PIF, the Public Investment Fund. They also have something called the Savvy Games Group, which is different than this. Savvy Games Group was investing in becoming stockholders in like EA prior to this, Take-Two, Capcom, Nexon, Activision Blizzard. They end up buying the mobile game developer Scopely for basically $5 billion a couple years back. They buy Niantic, or enter into an agreement to try and buy Niantic earlier this year. So there's sort of been an escalation of investing in a lot of sort of Western game companies, like Western sports. I think part of, I guess the question is like, what does it all mean? Like, in service of what, right? Like, I think there's lots of reasons to be pessimistic, to be suspicious, and yes, I guess we could point to EA as like, well, would anything meaningfully change if like this hadn't happened? Would the company sort of go on a similar arc? But it all feels bad, and it's just and what does it end like tangibly result in for the industry and for like you as like, you know, a player, as somebody that enjoys video games? Like, what is the tangible difference here? And then how do you reconcile that with just the fact that it's kind of cropping up all over, right? Like, they essentially own Evo now as well. Evo sort of like divided itself up and now essentially runs under the PIF as well.
What's that thing about all the eggs in the basket
Mm-hmm.
that you're not supposed?
Mhm.
Was I supposed to put all the eggs in the basket or not put all the eggs? I mean, I think that really is the, you know, I think looking at it from just like the gaming perspective, and what does it mean for like the art form and the work and all of that. It's just like a really extreme and more problematic look at like the consolidation we've been seeing throughout the industry. And I think while a lot of people are like, evil thing buys other evil thing, like that's, I think there was sort of the reaction like with the EA news, which is unfortunate because, yeah, I mean, EA does what they do and they make their money mostly off of like Ultimate Team and all of that, which like I know like a lot of people have like strong feelings about like the gambling components of like video games and things like that. But again, I play EAFC. I like EA Originals. Like there are products I've enjoyed out of what EA has put out there. So I think I'm slightly more of an EA fan than like the average person. But it is kind of, you know, it felt like it made sense to a lot of people in a way, like, oh, this isn't shocking, or as shocking as it would be for like other studios, like you mentioned, Patrick. But that doesn't mean like the walls don't feel like they're closing it a little bit, at least to me. And I think if you look at this and think, well, it's EA so big, and they like, you know, maybe don't give a fuck other than like making the money or whatever kind of vibe. Like I fear when else this might happen, or what other companies this might happen to. And yeah, consolidation has like. There aren't a lot of examples of it being towards like the larger benefit of the industry at large, whether it's like, you know, a layoff aspect, a ventral control aspect, or also just as things change, right? Like I think back to, I still have to finish actually the Psych Odyssey documentary. It's like super long, the one they posted on YouTube and
It's
all
really
that.
good.
But they like talk about
Yeah.
when they get acquired by like Microsoft or / Xbox, and it's just like what that means and how like, oh, it can be good in these ways, but then like you know, someone can walk in and then just kind of like end everything we're doing. Or, you know, even as we just saw like with the stuff happening with like Microsoft the company versus Xbox, and like how, you know, their relation to like the Israeli government, and like how now suddenly all these studios are kind of caught up in that because you're owned by this. So there's so many ways that things can cut and happen that you might not be able to see at the time. And I think that's what I'm at least like the most concerned about or fearful of. The combination of like what I can't see coming down the road, and also the idea of this being more widespread, and it essentially like meaning, you know, less options, like less freedom for things.
Yeah, I mean, this is at the very least, it breaks from the trend of game company buying other game company. There's a little bit now. That's not to say they're not invested across games, but it's not the level of consolidation we saw with like what Microsoft got up to in the past few years. But yeah, it is hard to imagine. Well, I guess in these times, it is hard to imagine any sort of major change on the business front leading to anything good, because that has not been the trend for some time. There haven't been a whole lot of deals that I think we can easily remember or point to and say like, boy, that really worked out for workers, for creatives, for audiences. There's another part of this. There's a lot of angst around the way the Gulf states, in particular Saudi Arabia, are acquiring soft power and sort of buying their way into public spaces. At the same time, This is a very expensive strategy. And do we think it's working? Like, do we think for all these investments that they've successfully made,
especially the ones that have been like really high profile and created amongst a lot of tension within the very spaces that they're trying, you know what I mean? Like, it caused giant cultural political rifts in golf when they made their big push. It's not as though behind the scenes we just acquired a bunch of stock, you know what I mean? Like, we acquire, like, so there's soft power is supposed to be soft. Like, they want soft power, they kind of want to but also want to take credit for it, and that's not usually like they want to cash in the chips immediately, be like, you know, we're here. And I think you're right. I mean, like, look here, like the where I just had this. Jason Schreier mentioned that Bloomberg has done some additional financial reporting on this. My colleagues at Bloomberg report that the $20 billion debt in the EA deal is expected to be rated single B, meaning it is considered a junk loan, or one that is high risk and speculative, typically offering high interest rates, which the new EA will likely have to pay. One thing that I have seen speculated that might happen is, so like HBO, for example, like the whole Warner Brothers stuff, like they most recently did a company split, even though the whole point of like a merger. Anyway, the Discovery portion has taken on all of the debt. It's two companies, and so you have like Warner Brothers, like their studios, their like the film stuff, like that has none of the existing like Discovery debt that came as part of like the merger, the acquisition. It seems pretty likely that like one of the scenarios here is that you do this knowing that EA goes away, and sort of you have a, I don't know, let's call it like EA Games and EA Sports, and this like toxic debt gets then assigned to EA Games, and that business goes away, while EA Sports is spun off with the most lucrative parts of Electronic Arts. And there's a lot of wreckage in that as the company goes through that transition, but that seems like one of the more likelier scenarios and how you would deal with debt that doesn't seem to make any logical financial sense to acquire or to be paid off. But in the short term, you'd have a bunch of shareholders that make a bunch of money, and then you would just have the bankruptcy process take care of the $20 billion that can't be paid back to the banks that for some reason signed on to them. But I think you're right, like Rob, in the bigger picture is like, if you look at like the, you know, Saudi Vision 30, 2030 or whatever, like, are we there? Do we feel like we're closer to it? Like do we feel like we've accomplished this?
I mean, so the thing is, like, a lot of this is being overseen by Mohammed bin Salman, and this guy is sort of a violent, very well-funded fail son. Like, that is kind of what we're talking about here. And so you hear less about it right now, but like, this is the same dude who was like, we're going to build the line in the desert, right? Danny O'Dwyer reminded me of this the other day on Shift F1, that for years we were hearing about his utopian mega city that was going to be just a big linear city built out in the desert, and it was going to stretch for like some ridiculous number, right? It was going to be like hundreds of kilometers of city. It was going to be like the Citadel in Mass Effect. It was totally concept art brained with no real concept of like how you would actually make something like that viable in a place where, you know, basics like large scale access to water is going to be tricky. None of that seemed to bother him with that plan, and that's sort of hit the rocks, right? That's kind of gone nowhere. And so, you know, I think, you know, as you pointed out, Patrick, like the idea with soft power is that there's a lot of like subtle ways to a good example is like the most successful soft power operation of like maybe ever was like post-war United States, right? Like America, like, and that's not necessarily totally a government agenda-driven thing. So you have American culture become globalized, and American entertainment products sort of become culturally predominant in a lot of spaces, and that becomes sort of the American worldview, America's conceptions about itself become like the world's propagandized that way about the United States, in a way that doesn't necessarily require like explicit government propaganda efforts. It is just like the cultural output of the United States sort of infiltrates every aspect of global culture. But the thing is, like, yes, people were aware that was happening, but also you had a lot of people sort of choosing to opt in to consuming American products, that these things became popular. People did like, American movies, American cultural output. That's a real different situation than a creepy prince rolling up with a bottomless wealth fund and just buying like popular and beloved institutions, with sort of the explicit goal of making you think a repressive autocratic regime is a like good partner to liberal democracies around the world. That this too is a sort of modern progressive country. Saudi Arabia's poured a lot of money into positioning itself in these spaces, and I think for the most part, it has pissed people off in those spaces. Like, it's weird. You'd have to. I tried to get at some of this with Danny, and he couldn't get into it because the Arsenal Man U thing is too personal for him. It's too close. But I do kind of wonder. On the one hand, like, as an example, like, there's a lot of soccer clubs that just started dominating because they had huge amounts of money show up, and they could literally like pay to win their national or regional championships. And they could do this for years on end.
So Ultimate Team is a documentary.
Pretty much. I mean, you just every month they Man City would just crack open the currency page and just like save more if we buy in bulk. But even those people, even the people who've like sort of explicitly won from those transactions, where it's like, oh cool, like my soccer club now dominates this league. Maybe those folks sort of warm up to the idea of like, oh, I love the new ownership. But even then, I'm not so sure. I don't know that any of this is translated into feelings of warmth or acceptance or affinity toward Saudi Arabia. And you know, maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe partly this is also about getting access to corridors of power and legislators and you know, influential people at all levels of civic life. But as much as we all kind of know the score and we know why the Public Investment Fund operates this way, I also don't know that I see that it's been particularly successful insofar as like building soft power goes, right? Like, these folks can't hold a comedy concert without it turning into a career crisis for anyone who accepted, right?
Right.
And the list of people who accepted is like people who you already kind of knew were purchasable in some ways, or like Louis C.K., who has been disgraced. So like even there, like, when you have a situation where you are just trying to throw a festival, a bog standard event, and anyone who is headlining, anyone who said they'd go and be a part of it, is now their entire career is about explaining why you did it and why
they gotta go on a
podcast
podcast to talk about it.
Yeah, and so I don't. As much as I'm sure Saudi Arabia would love to like promote its worldview and promote positive images of the kingdom through like things like the EA acquisition. Every time they do this, everyone's like, fuck off, we hate you. and they keep spending more money to get more people saying "fuck off, we hate you." Um,
I'm curious, because part of it is that it's public, right? Like, we know when these things are happening. If you want to think to the American example, there's actually a pretty good example in fine arts of like how something kind of like, I don't know if it changed art history.
talking about abstract art.
We're talking about the fact that if I asked anyone in this call right now, do you know who Kathy Kollowitz is?
No.
Mm-mm.
Do you know who Jackson Pollock is?
Yes.
Sure.
There it is. That is what the CIA spent its money on back in the day. Yeah, 100% sort of American abstract expressionism getting pushed specifically through just backing, like secret backing is the big thing, right? Like I think this is kind of the main difference that I see between these two examples, where like they would just like be the patrons that were like giving Pollock money to keep creating through purchases and stuff, where maybe, and like there are, it's a weird line, because I think abstract expressionism still exists at that time. There are too many other artists, too many like kind of the flow of ideas and like how we end up to abstract expressionism at that moment in time does kind of make sense. The real question is like how much, like just continuing to feed that into the like, you know, it's like AI training or whatever. Like you keep feeding a certain kind of thing, it keeps coming back up when it gets spat out, right? That's kind of human consciousness writ large. Just like we're gonna keep making sure that he makes art for as long as possible.
Which is, if you wanted to have the world reflected in your image, you would just quietly feed the world that image until the data set reflected it back at you and reflected the cultural and financial, like the cultural influence you get as a result of the quiet financial influence. But you're right, like there's a lot of like Saudi Arabia just feels like a kid with action figures. Like I want that. Like I want that, and then you're all gonna like it, and it's like we don't. I don't know about that.
I feel like even if the part of what I wonder about though is like I feel like if the CIA wasn't as secretive or like couldn't be as secretive and people knew, and still hated the fact that they were like supporting Jackson Pollock, if history washes out that much differently, right? Whether or not the fact that they are pumping money into these things.
Do we overly ascribe responsibility to? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying the other way around. Of like, if it, like, kind of just making a through line to the Saudi Arabia example of just like, does it matter that right now people hate them for these things when they do them, or will it matter 30 years down the line when they've been slowly influencing these things over time? Like, does it last long? Because that's the thing right now, right? Like, people know who Jackson Pollock is, but people don't know who Kathy Kollowitz, one of my favorite German artists from around the same time, because her art, which was kind of sort of realism, a lot of lithographs and drawings that are really beautiful, but are specifically about the shit like that the lower classes were going through in Europe, Germany specifically. The point of pushing abstract expressionism was we want to make sure those images of like, maybe class solidarity would be a good thing to have in these times, don't make it overseas, right? Through the dissemination of that art. If over time the fact that the biggest sort of sports franchises are video game sports franchises specifically, but also in real life, like you're saying, are just in subtle ways being, used to undercut any sort of critique against the thing. Like, does that play out over decades? That's the part that I worry about. But I mean, the issue being that they kind of have like limitless funds, right? Like it's it's oil money. Like, I don't think we're getting off oil anytime
It's easy to
soon.
look at this and like, this seems like a really risky investment. It's like, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, yes, 100%. Right? The amounts of money are staggering, and that's because
They're unfathomable. You
Yeah.
look at $20 billion and go, how long can this go on?
Right.
Like,
How-
well, unfortunately for a pretty long time.
Yeah. yeah. Not to mention that the like weird like backwards flips that you can do with like financial instruments, and like the fact that now EA is saddled with debt from its own purchase and things like that, like things that I still don't quite understand how that shit works.
And when you like, that's what like reading like Bloomberg lay it out. It's like, in what world is this? What? How is this good for anyone? It's like, well, it's good for the people who are buying it,
Yeah.
and who are getting out, which is how private equity vulturing
Yeah.
tends to work. It's how, you know, a company like Toys R Us, who sure was in trouble, but like they bought Toys R Us to tear it apart.
If memory serves, they were not in that much trouble.
Yeah.
It was a company that could have pivoted, but it like the private equity gets involved specifically to take a company, like ruin it essentially, and then take the pieces that it likes or just exploit it for the capital that's there, which is what happened. Like people made money on Toys R Us imploding, but that was the point, for Toys R Us to implode. It's a little bit different here, but there'll be people that make money regardless of whether they're an element of EA or some version of EA goes bankrupt. Like FC is not going anywhere. Madden's not going anywhere. So I don't know.
I don't know. I also tend to think, let's go put this. So the argument for what the CIA is trying to accomplish with something like Pollock, right, is less it's not super prescriptive in terms of the outcome that they're going for, right? Like, part of it is about depicting a sort of oppositional style to predominant modes of expression in the Soviet Union, and also promoting this idea that, you know what's passé? Art that says things and comments on socio-political issues. That's if you see a picture and you say like that shows a picture of like class oppression, boring. But this abstract painting is the cutting edge. What could it mean? Anything. Like you could like that's very clever, right? But that is still worlds away from getting people to think, we just need to help our friend Saudi Arabia carve out regional hegemony and hold the Iranian menace at bay. Which, by the way, is probably the most explicit. Like, if you start getting Battlefield games that are just explicitly like, squad up, boys, we gotta go liberate Iran, that's probably the most explicit like thing you would get out of this deal, where all these companies are allergic to like putting any sort of real world stuff in their games. Suddenly you would have a situation where it's like, oh yeah, no, you know, it's fine to like explicitly like label these people as the enemy. Sure, we're on board with that. Though I think countries like Iran and North Korea already sort of exist in that space, where for a lot of reasons, there's a lot of interest in sort of having them depicted as the enemy. They are safe enemies, right? In a way that for a long time, because Russia is like such an important market for a lot of products, you sort of pull back from making anything explicitly about like Russia or a Putin-like regime being the enemy in a video game. And it's why we see so many games now that are about like, you know, who's the enemy is like a weird international, like I think Battlefield is going, you know, it's going in this direction too, right? Like the US is under attack from a mysterious shadowy cabal of super empowered mercenaries. That doesn't sound good. We all hate the idea of super mercs like conquering the world. So obviously we would stop them. We would do that. So I hear what you're saying, Kato. Like over a long enough time, they probably they will find a way of leveraging the influence that they're acquiring, but also so far it's been so public, so noisy that I think for the most part it sort of reinforces this notion that like Saudi Arabia and the Saudi royal family are fundamentally like sinister or malign influences. But all will be forgiven if we get games that are better than ever.
Well, the funny part is like if they just said like we're actually EA has a vast catalog of IP that has difficulty being justified in the commercial market, we would just like EA to make good games, and we're going to hire and pay people and bring back, I don't know. What's in EA's vault? What could get you?
Oh, I mean, like,
They're gonna remake
Wing
Dead
Commander.
Space 2.
Yeah.
Oh shit! All right, well, okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Yep. All right, we're already
You know
in.
what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that was the statement that was like released alongside this, like, the reason we're doing this fund is because, and we're taking it private, is we should just make great video games. And the Dead Space 2 comes along, and then Rob and I do like another side by side comparison. You know, like it's shit like that.
Yep.
That's power, man. Like that gets you to forget. And I guess that's part of like all of this that I don't get a sense of what the arc is supposed to be yet. Like it's so ham-fisted getting the foot in the door because you're just buying the door and then announcing that you bought the door. But it's unclear to me what is like if all that's phase 1. I guess part of it happened with Live, right? Like I guess a little of phase 2 is what happened in Golf, which was mostly a shit show.
Well, also because again, what your reputation is so bad that you get the worst partners, right? You get like an outright
You get like
dickhead
Mickelson,
like Greg
right?
Norman.
Yes, like you get just like the worst athletes who would immediately like there was an attrition with the golf stuff where it's like, well, that check was big enough. I guess I'll do both. But like at the start, it's just like, so I'm a piece of shit, and like I'm really excited to sign on to Piece of Shit League because it's for pieces of shit like me.
I'm a piece of shit who there's rumors I have recurring issues with massive amounts of gambling debt, the types of which get people killed. Not going to say who I'm talking about, but some of the people who were tip of the spear on Live Golf was kind of like, so is this how this famous golfer ends up dead in a pond someday? Is this the start?
So I guess that part is just like unclear to me, like what, and like based on past evidence, I think there's like a reason to suspicious that it will be anything other than just a giant unwieldy hammer that gets wielded, and like that could hurt a lot of people in the process. I'm not trying to like justify or hand that wave away. I think it is ultimately bad news for, you know, the 15,000 people that EA employs. I think it's going to be a fundamentally different company. I think the most likely, like, least sinister outcome is just the very least they just stop becoming anything but a sports company. And that's just a fundamentally different sort of EA. But whether they become like a meaningful, sort of like sinister outreach of a cultural export, I just haven't seen them been able to pull that off. Like it's much more benign in like the Evo sense, right? Like I sort of expect Evo to just keep happening, and there'll be a lot of strained conversations that folks have on like whether they're going or not going, and is going. Like you see that in Evo, right? Like is participating in Evo, especially like I've seen this with conversations around like Sonic Fox, like folks who are like outwardly queer, identify differently. Like is that a form of protest? Is showing up to these spaces like itself a form of pushing back, and that's where it gets complicated, right? Where like they sort of just quietly exist in the background, occupy the spaces that were once yours, and then you have to make a decision on whether showing up is, I don't know, a political act, which I think is, you know, we're seeing that play out in a lot of esports right now, which, I mean, that's the other big arm of it, right, Rob? Like, I mean, has been like a massive push into acquiring and funding like esports events around where have people fallen on that? Like, is it just sort of people throwing up their hands, like to the best that you can speak to it?
I don't follow it super closely anymore.
Right, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
like,
it's just like part of it is a lot of drawing a distinction here between esports and FGC.
Yes.
Esports has never sweat where the money is coming from too much. Like that has just been the trend. Like it's always
esports itself is by definition trying to commoditize and commercialize multiplayer competitive play. FGC is a description of a community that has some elements of esports in and around it, right?
Right. And so I think esports, because it was so almost like proactively making an effort to court investment and become corporate friendly, and in fact would try and get its fans stoked about things becoming more corporate. Like, we're so excited that insert beloved like esports team here, like, you know, a Team Liquid or something. We're so excited to be partnering with Raytheon or something like that, or like you know, we're you would have them cutting promos, or like we're not just Team Liquid anymore. We're partnering with MasterCard, things like that. And you'd have people being like, yeah, this is good. This grows esports. But there was always the side of this that was like, is this a bubble? Like, is this translating to, is all this investment translating to a more popular product? Is it becoming self-sustaining? In a lot of ways, because that was not really happening, the industry became even more accepting and thirsty for outside investment. FGC is a slightly different thing, because FGC has always been at arm's length a little bit with the corporatification of things like Evo. That a lot of companies and brands circled Evo like sharks because they wanted the cred of being like connected to a community event, but also to varying degrees within that community, people were aware of those interests and were really mixed on whether or not they wanted that to be the direction of where like competitive fighting games were going. So I think that's always been complicated. I think in those spaces, some of what the effect, I don't know if it's by design, but some of the effect of of an investor like the Public Investment Fund showing up, I think some of what they accomplish just by showing up is poisoning a space and making it hard for, well, take someone like Sonic Fox. You put people like that in a bind. On the one hand, their job is go to Evo, crush it, dominate. Like, Evo was there before the Public Investment Fund. Like, it is it is the big tournament. It's not like by showing up you're obliged to say, you don't have to get in front of the camera and be like, and by the way, huge thanks to to Mohammed bin Salman. We're so excited. You don't have to say that, but just by showing up, some people will interpret it as, hey, why didn't you like stand by your values? Why didn't you refuse to go as long as it's affiliated with someone like that? And I think sort of the outcome that serves the interests of people like the Saudi royal family, serves the interest of reactionaries, is that it stokes cynicism within those communities. Like, Saudi Arabia will draw criticism in those environments, but also it turns a lot of guns against marginalized people in those communities who are sort of faced with these choices where, do you participate in a thing? Is that seen as selling out? Is that seen as betrayal? Suddenly you put them in a bind that like kind of has a chilling effect on their influence and speech, where they can either disappear from a venue and probably by extension recede a little bit from public thought, or they can show up and be labeled as collaborators effectively. So I think that does serve their interests a little bit, because as much as criticism as they get, it also creates a toxic conversation for people who would broadly be aligned with the notion that like the public investment fund being involved with institutions like this is not a good thing. So I think that's where some of that stuff ends up, which is to say it ends up in a messy place.
Right. So I guess as we kind of bring this to a close, like we won't know for sure whether this is happening for a minute. I think the guidance they got in the press release or in the was that Q1 2027 is when this is expected to close. So there'll be a lot that happens between now and then. And I'm sure a lot of discussion over. I don't know. I mean, can they sell? Will they will part of this moment be setting that company up for whatever that transition is, right? Like what happens with your BioWares of the world between now and then? I don't know. I think we'll probably get some signals on that along the way.
I wonder if you could sell a BioWare.
To who?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's not what the market was a few years ago, where like there was the hunger for just development bandwidth.
Well, also just how people like this would have been the kind of situation where I don't know, 4 years ago you would have had people like Microsoft, just go save BioWare, and now people are like
Microsoft, stay away from BioWare.
No.
Not you, Microsoft. You stay right where you are.
Yeah, no. Like you're just gonna ruin what's already. So, yeah,
Konami, save.
But you'd be
BioWare.
buying the question would be you're not buying BioWare. Will EA sell IP? Right? Someone would buy Mass Effect.
Yeah.
Someone would buy Dragon Age. What is BioWare these days? That said, every time this happens, I think like once a month, someone realizes that the head writer on the deeply underrated Guardians of the Galaxy game that Eidos Montreal put out is the head writer on Mass Effect 5. And the writing of that Guardians game is fucking S tier. Like it's an okay game.
And S tier in Mankind Divided.
Right. Mary DeMarlin, I think is her name. And she's like, so it's like I wasn't looking forward to Mass Effect 5 that much, but I'll look forward to whatever the hell she does because she's
an actual like genius narrative designer.
Yes,
and crucially, and not to overscribe it all to one person, but
when I say her, I mean her and everything that comes with like someone that smart and the kinds of teams they build. I think people
can't overstate the degree to which like Guardians of the Galaxy. Hilarious, actually really good comic story. Like hits all the better than most of the Guardians movies in terms of like how
it manages to be its own thing and also like builds off Gunn's interpretation. It's what a good.
But then you
game.
play like Deus Ex: Mankind Divided, bleak dystopian Eastern European cyberpunk noir
range, baby.
Yeah, it's like spot on. It nails it. Well, shit. I didn't realize she was running Mass Effect 5.
So for me, it's just a question.
I'm all in.
Right. I mean, like Amazon is doing a Mass Effect show. I guess Amazon's one of the few companies you would imagine would be like have the pocket. Like when Amazon buy Mass Effect,
a lustrous lineage of making it work in games.
Well, but I guess if you try to view Mass Effect as their expanse, right? Like where Bezos just buys the shiny toy that he wanted and said, "Go make it." Although they didn't get to really finish that series, right? They went further, but not all the way to the end.
They got it to the point where there's a big time skip.
Okay.
Where they left it would have been a big. Basically, you would have made a different series for where the Expanse universe goes from there, which is some places. It's interesting, but. That you could see something like that, and I think that would be a case where, like, as long as BioWare is still intact, you would, if you're willing to sell me the IP, sell me the studio, just so I can, bring the whole thing, over.
So I can imagine stuff like that happening in the next 12 months. Is like Amazon announces acquisition of BioWare along with Mass Effect and Dragon Age IPs. That makes a lot of sense in the world to me, and frankly might be. Regardless of like the recent events, shuffling from one bad corporate entity to another, but it would probably be a healthier place for it to end up. That's also the argument everyone made for Microsoft acquiring all these studios that got completely fucked. So careful what you wish for.
Yeah. One final thought occurs to me. Is it a little weird that they had to take on $20 billion of debt to finance this deal? Like, on the one hand, we're talking about, like, they have bottomless money, right? It's all the oil money. Like, they can buy whatever they want.
Yeah.
But half the money for this is debt that is going to make the company subsequent to this deal less viable.
I wish You're right. Like, that sounds bad. I don't...
There have sometimes been rumors that they might not be as loaded as we think they are. That under MBS in particular, there have been hints that the bottomless well of oil well money is not as bottomless as we once thought. Like, there was sort of a famous example. It was interpreted purely as a political power grab where he, like, locked up a huge number of Saudi royals and basically extorted them into signing away, like, their right to various funds as members of the royal family. And it was, again, interpreted as purely a political, like, elimination of rivals move, but there were some people who were sort of crunching the numbers and being like, that's also kind of what you do if you had to emergency, like, balance the books for the royal family. So I don't know, like, a deal like this that's like half debt financing. I know that sometimes there's reasons that you do, like, strategic debt, but I'm just curious about that aspect of it as well, because on the one hand, it's like, these people can afford anything. And then they went and they sat in the loan office and got someone, and they did the paperwork to go make this deal happen. So I don't know.
If anyone knows, please write into questions at Remap. If, like, you have an expertise, questions at remapradio.com, like, in finance or debt financing, that might help us understand it. Because I looked around for that, and I couldn't. I saw lots of reporting and writing about how there are just different competing, like, it was a win for JP Morgan because they get to get the fees associated with the debt, but it wasn't an explanation of why we were doing the debt in the first place. So anyone knows, write in, help us figure it out.
All right, well, we will be back after a break to talk games. Back after this.